Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Still We Persist. This is the next part of our Prism of Feminist Lenses series. I'm Shaina Khan, one of the co-hosts.
And I'm Mia Visu. I also use she and they pronouns. We are very excited to bring together some guests to talk about ecofeminism and how these lovely two people's work kind of shows that, and we'll dive deeper into that later. But first, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. So I'll go ahead and start. I'm at OSU in Corvallis, so that's where I'll be giving the acknowledgement from. So OSU is located within the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Ampunefu Band of Kalapuya. And following the Willamette Treaty of 1855, Kalapuya people were forcibly removed from their reservations in Western Oregon. And today, living descendants of these people are part of the Confederate tribes of the Grand Grand Community of Oregon and the Confederate tribes of Siletz Indians as well.
And I'm in the Louisville, Kentucky area, specifically the Jeffersontown neighborhood, which includes the homelands of the Shawnee Eastern Band of Cherokee, Adena, Osage, and Hopewell people. Through both physical violence and legislation, most members of these nations were removed from Kentucky. They were forced to leave, but some members of these peoples remain in Kentucky, and I have to acknowledge that I'm working from their land. Mia, would you like to get us started with the conversation?
Yeah, for sure. So when I originally thought about wanting to do an ecofeminism type of conversation, it's really to better understand and better come into awareness that the domination of nature is often coincides with exploitation of women and the domination and systems of hierarchy that exist there intertwine and intersect. So that intersection is really important to recognize. And the IA team thought it'd be great to have Cierra and Coral just to speak about some of their work, if it aligns even just a little bit. Yeah, and so with that, I just want to introduce Coral and Cierra. I'll actually go ahead and let them introduce a bit of themselves at this moment. Yeah, so whoever wants to get started first, go for it.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Cierra. I use she, her pronouns. I'm currently in Long Beach, California. I've been hanging out down here for about a year because it's my hometown. I'm excited to come back in the fall, though. I want to be back around people. And I'm a junior here at OSU, set to graduate next winter, and I'm studying environmental science with a focus of applied ecology.
I'm Coral. I use both they and she pronouns. I'm a Shawnee tribal citizen, and I actually just graduated this fall, finally, from OSU, and I'm still based in Corvallis, working as a natural resource specialist for a few agencies, but my main focus is climate sciences for tribal groups and tribal partnerships. So thanks for having us here.
Totally, yeah. And with that, we had some people from the IA team recommend you both to be a part of this conversation. And Coral, I've been keeping up with you on Instagram. I know Cierra, you've been on our Woke Wednesdays before. So yeah, if y'all could just talk a little bit about your work and what you do. I know, Coral, you just mentioned you work for I don't know what's it called, natural resources and working with climate justice kind of things. So if y'all just want to share about your work and then how you see a connection with ecofeminism, if there is one, and however you define that, it's totally fine.
Cierra, did you want to go first?
I'm gonna let you lead the way here.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, I started as a intern for the Bureau of Indian Affairs through the Pathways program. There was a professor at OSU that reached out with the application, and I'm really, really glad that I signed up for the opportunity, because it led to a job that I just transitioned to officially this past month, but I'm still in the transition process. And that's natural resource specialist for the BIA Tribal Resilience Program, which focuses on climate change infrastructure and like the way that systems work together to promote, you know, like traditional values and culture, but also to adapt for a changing climate. And that's obviously very ingrained with ecofeminism as well in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of intersections in environmental work. Everything that we do for the organization is collaborative with different state, tribal, government, nonprofit organizations. And of course, like most Indigenous peoples view the world through that holistic lens and interconnected worldview. So things like pipelines, when they're, you know, putting them through native lands, ceded or unceded, they're causing like man camps, all the people that are coming to work in those areas. There's always a spike in violence against primarily Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit folks, and other gender minorities, and not specific to Indigenous people, but there are much higher rates. So issues of, or the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women is also really prevalent in the work that I'm doing, and is very connected with climate action and activism as well. So that was one example that I wanted to share.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Coral. I would say I put the word work for me in quotations because a lot of the work that I do currently is just class and like coursework. But I've encountered this concept of ecofeminism quite a bit in a couple of my courses through, what can I think of off the top of my head? I've taken women in natural resources. I've taken multicultural perspective in natural resources. I am taking currently an environmental writing class that has had a conversation about ecofeminism and other environmental ideologies. So I've gotten bits and tastes of it. I don't necessarily do any work myself that like centers on this topic in general, but I'm building my knowledge base of it. So that's kind of what I wanted to gather. I think we'll talk more about what we think this concept is and things like that, but I kind of wanted to put out there that I'm still like a student and I'm still like learning in this experience as well.
I find myself like learning a lot too, even though I studied environmental engineering for a while. It just feels like there's so many things that I wasn't taught in schools, but that are like very important to me. So my first question is, what values do you all bring to your work or your activism, or even to the classroom? Here, like you're saying, a lot of your work is focused on school right now.
Aligning with this concept of ecofeminism, one of the things that I've gathered about the ideology is that there needs to be more work around intersectional thinking. So I think the values that I bring when I learn and go through my coursework here at OSU around environmental issues is intersectional thinking and just kind of perspective taking and seeing like how certain environmental issues, even though it could be the same issues such as pollution or, as I'm trying to think, like, for example, putting dumps or toxic waste in like minority communities, those types of issues affect certain communities differently, even if it's the same scenario. So I think just kind of having an intersectional lens is a value that I bring.
Yeah, I would pretty much say exactly the same thing. Learning throughout one's lifetime too, I think is important to understand. Like, you're never going to have a full like understanding of things. You're not like born with all the knowledge. So people are we're all students throughout our entire lives. And of course, just because I graduated and I now have like a really impressive sounding job title. Like, I don't know it all. So as much as I love learning from school and learning from my work too, just like meeting other people that are really passionate about whether it's ecofeminism specifically, or maybe something that seems outside of, you know, environmental action in general. Like, all of these things are interconnected and related, and like finding those bridges between like people's passions and things that we all want to like stand up for or against is like what drives that like knowledge base and that work.
Totally. Yeah, like this is exciting me so far, this conversation, because like I also majored in environmental science and I have like an ethnic studies minor. Like to reflect that like with the environmental science degree on its own, I don't feel like there were some chances, like Cierra also took like the multicultural perspectives and natural resources class, but there wasn't too much chances for like reflection or making that intersection clear about how like all of these things are interconnected, which we know. Yeah, and yeah, I was just thinking about that. And what does like a practice, an approach to this work look like? And I know that I've heard from you, Cierra, like we're learning like the foundations of it, or just building a knowledge base. And then Coral, you're like in the field, actually like being able to do this work. So like specifically, like what does that look like? And I know you're just transitioning, so maybe that's hard to answer, but to the best that you can, like what do these approaches and like actual practices look like outside of maybe a textbook or something like that?
Well, I can start then. I guess it started for me like really young through my own just experiences of things that like would happen or that I would see that would really upset me, and just wanting to do something about it. So that was like attending events and rallies and like donating to causes. Again, some more environmentally focused, most of them not though. And then realizing through public education a little bit, mostly through other people, and then reaching college and being able to kind of focus on that area that I was more interested in. Did learn a little more about the ways that they all interconnect. And I did want to say before, like, I feel like there a lot of the classes where started to touch on those interconnections too came through my specialization option, because I focused on human dimensions. So it's more of the social sciences too. And I think the social sciences are really underrated overall through academia. And yeah, preferred for like hard sciences like chemistry and biology, which are all really important too. But without that like science communication and understanding of like people and place and grounding yourself, the other work can be done, but it doesn't mean that it'll be like applied well or in a way that will like help people as well as planet. So I did want to say that too. But as far as work that I'm doing right now, it's looking a lot like supporting folks with grant applications for funding for like climate-based infrastructure in tribal communities, or connecting environmental groups and state government agencies with tribes to see ways that they can work on certain issues together, certain projects where they can find kind of mutual understanding and like work towards common goals. Which is difficult sometimes, but really important work because overall, like, we all live on the same planet. We all need, you know, some pretty basic water and natural resources and things to survive physically, but also like those things to care about and be passionate about, and be able to spend time in nature and focus on our own like health and wellness too. So I may have gotten off topic there a little bit, sorry, but I hope that answered the question.
That's all very valuable, and I appreciate hearing like how you've been able to put this into practice with your new job out of undergrad. I think the original question was kind of aiming at like, you know, what is a approach, or what is a aim at pursuing or doing work around ecofeminism is. And I think, far as I understand, a lot, the root of this kind of like environmental ideology is a lot of perspective taking, a lot of observation, and a lot of making connections. So, Coral, you kind of answered the question as in like, how did this kind of value or framework show up in your life? And you kind of said early on, and I think if I had to take the same route to answer the question, I think I'm a very introspective person. I'm a very thoughtful person. I tend to do a lot of making connections between things in my mind, as I'm very observational. So I think for me, ecofeminism is kind of a practice of doing those things and making connections and kind of examining very dominant social frameworks of thought. Like, I think I've had conversations with people such as, you know, the ecofeminism kind of has a, it wants to refute like patriarchy. So I think along with the idea and the concept of patriarchy is this logic of domination. And I think my approach to that is kind of acknowledging that and acknowledging the ways that it relates to the oppression of nature and also the oppression of women. So I think it's just a lot of drawing connections for me personally, and that's how it's shown up in my life.
Yeah, that leads into a question I had for both of you. One of the things that pushed me out of engineering was, like, even though I was working for the government, I was supposed to be like, I was literally in an environmental protection role. I realized that my job was still to uphold patriarchy, and just in a way that followed laws. And I wasn't really working towards environmental justice. And like Cierra, you mentioned that there's still a major element of patriarchy. Like in the workplace, I was constantly dealing with patriarchal attitudes. And I think, Coral, you touched on my question a little bit, but I'm wondering for both of you, what are some frustrations you encounter, maybe a little more specifically than you mentioned already, and how do they intersect with like larger systems of oppression? And if you found a way to deal with those frustrations, like how do you do that? And maybe Coral, I'll have you start.
Yeah, I feel you. On that, it's hard. Government work is difficult. I did not think that I would end up here for sure, but some of the frustrations really lie in those kind of power structures that are already, already there when you come in, and that can't really be changed unless we have a full system change, which is really, really frustrating. There's a lot of talk of, diversifying the employee base of organizations, which is also incredibly important, but those structures are still in place for folks coming in. And so it's not just about diversifying, but it's making it an equitable workspace and making sure that the structure as a whole is not working to use employees to meet some end goal, but working with and finding that, goal that actually works for everyone and can disrupt that system of power. And that's really hard to do within structures that are pre-existing. So that plays out or shows itself in a lot of different ways on a daily basis, despite working for like a tribally focused organization. I am sometimes the only tribal citizen that's in meetings. I'm often the only femme person there, often the only queer person, often the only young person, especially. There's really not a lot of young people in government. And everybody also comes in with very different like very different life experiences, of course, too, and approaches in the way that they want to go about work. So I've been really fortunate with the group that I work most closely with, that it's all like really powerful Indigenous women who I really look up to. And I am more focused on working with the other Pathways interns that, although I'm not an intern anymore, I get to work with them and answer any questions that they have during this weird transition period that I'm in now, and having that kind of peer-to-peer guidance as well. Like the folks that were supporting me as I started this process has really made all the difference.
Okay, I have quite a lot of thoughts about this question. So again, I'm still kind of within the framework of an academic setting. And quite frankly, I relate to you, Coral, that you find yourself to be kind of the only person holding these very dominant identities in the room that you're in. And I think my frustration, quite frankly, has been, you know, as a Black young woman in an academic setting, being kind of like the only Black young woman that I know, pursuing like an environmental science degree at this like university. And I'm probably not the only one ever, but I mean, like, I don't have that peer support that you had mentioned, Coral. So I think the lack of just like representation has been pretty disheartening at sometimes, because it's easy to internalize like, I don't belong here because there's nobody here that looks like me, you know? So that has been a frustration and a source of kind of conflict pursuing this degree for the last couple of years. But I do find strength in it as well, because I am forging a path in a way, and I am providing leadership example by saying, like, you know, I am a Black young woman and I am pursuing an environmental degree, and I want to do things with it, and people that look like me are allowed to be in this space and take up space, and have a voice, and, you know, use it for certain for creating change. So that's kind of my immediate reaction, unfortunately, to this question. But the way that I've been able to pull myself out of it is just to remind myself, you know, that it is an opportunity for strength as well. And also, you know, to be bullied out, or, you know, to be intimidated out of a degree where you don't feel represented doesn't help the problem. So that's kind of my thoughts around that.
Thank you both. I really relate with both of you. I feel like what both of you said is really resonating for me right now. One, Cierra, for representation in the environmental science degree. Like, as I'm a senior now, I'm not sure if you are or not, but yeah, I felt that frustration as well, and actually started taking a lot more online classes starting, I think, like late sophomore year, just because the classroom, I did not like it. Like, it was very white, of course. And yeah, that shifted a lot of things for me. There's like pros and cons for the switch that I made, but yeah, really relate to that, Cierra. And then Coral, I'm actually about to enter a similar position as you. I'll be working under the National Park Service as in a communications position with this national nonprofit that does climate resiliency work in red line neighborhoods. And with that, it's like me entering into like the government workforce, which I was like, I never thought I'd do that. Kind of you, but like, also I do get to like be in community and have like impact with the folks I want to be working with, especially like focusing on climate resiliency. But yeah, I haven't exactly entered that space yet, but I have a feeling I'm going to face similar struggles as well, as far as like who's in the workplace, like what does that team look like. So yeah, I just wanted to say that what both of you all said resonates as well for me. And then just, there's a train in the background, but wait one sec. I also wanted to, sorry.
This part will be edited out.
Yeah, totally.
Take a
totally.
sip while we're waiting.
I couldn't even tell because I'm just hearing the train out of my window.
Nice. Nice.
Kentucky, I did not hear the train.
Yeah.
I'm Long Beach,
Yeah.
I hear the train. I hear planes a lot because I live near LAX.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, and it's starting to pick up again after COVID. Right. All of that to go into my next question, which was like, who have been the people? And I know, Coral, you mentioned this group of Indigenous women you get to work closely with. Like, maybe let's talk a little more specifically about like what inspires you, what's kept you going, and like who are the people who have been able to like maintain support for you, and like how have you been able to keep going on this journey? Because as we had just mentioned, it can be difficult.
Two of the people that have been my biggest supporters or like mentors to me were Lahui White Bear and Allison Davis White Eyes, who I met, as most people that know them, at OSU, although they're involved in so many other things. And I've been so fortunate that during my internship process, when I was working with the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, we're able to have both of them were excited to be involved in what AT and I had going on when we had like events or different things going on regionally that they wanted to bring to our attention to share the message. So I still get to like, everything's been virtual, but I still get to see their names pop up on my screen, and it just makes me smile every time. And I feel like I have that support system. And another one of my supervisors, one of the women who leads the tribal climate resiliency program. Again, I haven't actually met the majority of my coworkers because I started this position last June during COVID. And so everything has just been at home on the computer, which is a very different and oftentimes difficult way to work, or for me to get work done. I'm a very in-person and hands-on kind of, yeah, that's my preference for working. So it's been a transition, but she's been very supportive of all the ins and outs of this kind of work because it's very difficult and confusing. There's usually not somebody to kind of explain those things. It's really just doing your own Googling and trying to figure it out, but there's not so much of a like orientation transition kind of process with it. So having those folks that'll look out for you and that you can rely on is absolutely invaluable. And recognizing all the incredible work that they're doing as well, and hopefully being able to aspire to be a tiny portion of that someday is what inspires me.
For me, I have like, there are generic answers. Like my family is obviously my support system through hard times, and times where I'm kind of in doubt about myself and my capabilities and things like that. But I think the sources that have given me the most structure and the most support have pretty much been, if I'm thinking of like the on-campus setting, I am a part of the Educational Opportunities Program, EOP, which is kind of like an orientation program for minority students coming into OSU. So that program, like even 3 years later, some people that I was originally in my cohort with coming in as freshmen have dropped out of it. But it has really helped me find like a community here on campus of other minority people of color students that were also wide-eyed freshmen and kind of like, this school's very white. I feel like I don't belong here. So EOP has given me that community. I still have like my very closest friends on campus, one of which is Alexandria Ganera, who I talked to get on this. So But yeah, EOP is definitely one major pillar of my support. And outside of the academic setting, I get a lot of my inspiration and just like will to forge my path in environmental sciences through following environmental scientists and women that are doing work in the field. In particular, I can think of a couple people that I follow on Instagram, one of which is I think her username is biologist Imogen, but she's like out, oh God, I don't know what part of the world she's in, but she's doing work with like tracking endangered wildcats with like scat studies and things like that, which sounds gross, but it's just like seeing women that are actually out there doing things and making a difference. It's just incredibly empowering for me. And I know social media can either be, you know, a good or a bad thing. It has its pros and cons, but when I see people out there doing work that I inspired to do and just giving me examples of what is possible, that's my invaluable source of support for me. So yeah.
Those are great answers. And I'm really glad, like, I think we all share similar frustrations as people who care about the environment and about, you know, gender-based equality. So I'm glad you all are finding ways to deal with the really big and small problems that we all come across all the time. Mia, sorry, I'm going off script here, but I like personally have a question that I'm really interested in as I teach, and I would like to see more like overlap between the STEM fields and the social sciences, like both of you have mentioned. And so I'm wondering what's one thing that you would want like either STEM students or like students in the social sciences to learn, or like a change you would want to see to campus to make like women in our fields, or like you know, anybody else, non-binary people, feel more like these fields are for us. So my examples would be when I was studying engineering, I really wished I had had a course in gender studies, just so I understood that the problems that I was seeing were not my fault. There were like, you know, gender-based inequalities and like, you know, racial inequalities kind of built into the STEM fields. And I always appreciate when in my gender studies courses, we talk about environmental justice too, because like you were saying, Cierra, a lot of the injustices that happen along the lines of race are because like the environment just isn't as safe for people of color in the United States. So I'm wondering like if you all have one or two things that you would want like students to have as a resource, or like something to change in the curricula.
Cierra, I would love to hear what you think, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's a really powerful question. I'm trying to formulate what I think would actually be an impactful change that I would like to see in the university, as far as having more interdisciplinary coursework. My immediate reaction is, unfortunately, some people would see things like that as unnecessary and have pushback because they're like, why am I having to pay to take this class that doesn't have to do with my major? Like, what are you doing? So that was my immediate like concern, but I do think that it is very important to have those overlaps. Just like in my personal life, you know, I am pursuing a STEM field, and my mom was a university professor and she taught sociology. So I have kind of that element of the social sciences in my life just personally, and I get to learn from what she taught her students. She's retired now. But I have that overlap in my personal life, but people around me otherwise might not. So I think the first thing that I can think of, one of the most valuable things that one of the most valuable experiences that I've gone to very early in my undergrad. I think I was a freshman, but I went to kind of like, I think it was like a research mixer. It was within CEOS, the College of Earth, Ocean, Atmospheric Sciences. But I did have conversations with professors that came to the research mentor that were outside of our university or like our college, and got to have some conversations about the overlap between like the hard sciences and social sciences. So I don't know what it would look like, but maybe having opportunities where mixing conversations like that could happen. I'm not really sure what I would call that, but that was like my first reaction to that question.
Yeah, I like that answer a lot. That was actually my first thought too, of thinking, oh, what would other students react if they were like made to, take certain courses? Because I'm a first generation college student, and I was a transfer student to Oregon State. And when I transferred, it was pretty difficult to get into the ins and outs of OSU and not really knowing anybody, trying to figure out work in the area and just get used to like living in Corvallis is pretty different than, I'm also from Southern California, but a different part than Cierra. And so it was an interesting transition, but I was invited by Dr. Allison Davis White to participate in PPOI. I'm totally forgetting what the acronym was, but it it was basically a group of faculty and then a few students who undergrad and grad students who just happened to hear about it, to be a part of the conversation of looking at like retention rates for students and faculty for international or BIPOC or from other marginalized groups, and hopefully take that data and look at ways to improve retention and make sure that students and faculty needs are being met by the university. And a part of that too, and part of that conversation on more of the transfer student end was looking at how classes would transfer, because a lot of my community college credits did not transfer to OSU, and that's very common for folks, especially if you're coming from out of state. And some of them were in state, some were out of state. But anyway, looking at that and then looking at how many credits or classes students should be taking as extracurricular and what kind of options are available for that. And as amazing as it would be to have some that are focused and required, like for social sciences, I don't know that everybody's going to get that. And so I think it's just up to professors really to make sure that that's the kind of content that's included in their course, that that's some kind of requirement for a syllabus to include the intersections with other areas as well. Long story short, sorry, but I think that context was needed. That's the way that I would hope that folks go about it, to make sure that everybody gets that kind of understanding, because it is relevant to your area of study. We just don't see those connections, as Cierra said, too often in academic spaces, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think you both are right. Like there's so many complaints whenever like STEM students or anybody who are not in the social sciences have to like actually learn about the way the world works, not just like the way math and science work. But like I had to take differential equations and I've never used it since I took it like 13 years ago, right? But like I did it. So why can't people take other things that are actually going to be relevant when they're interacting with other human beings in their work and their activism? Yeah, but I really appreciate both your answers. And there are actually faculty at OSU who are looking more at the overlap between the STEM majors and like ethnic studies and gender studies. So your suggestions are appreciated, and hopefully we can like actually implement these things sometime. And Mia, I think it's your turn to ask a question or take us into the next or last part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's been a full conversation so far. I also really love both of your suggestions. The first thing that came to my mind was about like making changes to syllabi. So yeah, great point, leading us into that, Cierra, and then making the point, Coral. I think, yeah, that's where probably realistically where most of the changes will end up happening. And then just leading us into a closing, because it's about that time. Just what is your hope for the environment when there's a society that is not run on a culture that perpetuates harm and domination and hierarchies, whether that's race or through gender or, you know, all of those things. When people are free of that, or the world is free of that, and I don't know how it's gonna happen, but like I think we're all working towards that. And this conversation brings me a lot of hope. But yeah, what do you imagine will be, okay, I'll change it to this. How do you imagine people will connect to the environment? Like, how do we work on restoring that peace? And I mean that like with our bodies, with our spirits, our minds, just to complete that. Because I feel like people are going to have to heal from this long period of harm that's been caused by colonization. Yeah, I'm really calling out that right now. So yeah, what does that look like in y'all's minds? And this is going to take some imagination, and feel free to take a silent moment to think too.
Okay, I have thoughts. I'm not sure how succinctly I can put this, but we're gonna try. So I appreciate you prefacing that question by saying it's gonna take some imagination, because that is a very profound question that takes a lot of like assumptions that, you know, quite frankly, some of the harm that we have done is reversible, and we don't know that that is true, you know. Gosh, what do I imagine how people interact with the environment if harm was not a part of the equation? Just again, drawing from some of the values that are associated with ecofeminism as an environmental ideology. This ideology kind of draws on ethics of care and kind of taking away the idea and the kind of essential nature in society that we have and we put on impartiality and saying, you know, like that feelings are bad. I think that a way that you, as you mentioned, Mia, that we could kind of like heal that relationship is to just put feelings back into the equation and kind of put value in response and reciprocity, and not just taking from nature, and having more of a focus on restoration and appreciation in a way. I feel like I can hear my professor from my ecosystem services class about, you know, the ecosystem services of like, you know, aesthetic and cultural values that nature holds. So just kind of leaning on that really, and examining and challenging oppositional thinking and hierarchical thinking, because we as humans really love to put ourselves first in everything that we do. Anthropocentrism, everybody. So I think just having more of a like a emphasis on reciprocity with nature, and just putting more value on restoration and seeing that and appreciating that nature does a lot for us, you know, in terms of like pharmaceuticals, like cultural and value, aesthetic value, obviously water and things that you can't get without nature. So that is my not succinct answer at all.
That's a great answer though. Yeah, I like what you were saying about a culture of care, Cierra. Like care is a very like gendered kind of concept too. And care is seen first as like a loving thing, but oftentimes it's seen very negatively too. Why you care so much? You don't have to care about everything. And there was a study I was reading that was basically a headline like toxic masculinity is killing the planet. And I believe it was published by Global Citizen. It was 2018 study, but it was essentially saying that men are more likely to, or women are more likely to care and make change in your daily habits to be more sustainable, and men to preserve that idea of masculinity, which in this case is toxic masculinity. We're more likely to pollute and do things that harm the planet and that harm women and other gender minorities as well. So once we kind of look within and break down these gendered stereotypes and norms that we have pervasive throughout the dominant culture in the US and beyond, then we're going to see some more positive outcomes for the planet as well, and vice versa, as we care for the planet and have that more reciprocal relationship when we're growing our own food and, you know, picking up trash when we go on a hike, like little things, or speaking with our legislators and making some larger policy changes. Those things are also going to have an impact the other direction too on those gendered norms and that culture of care. And so there's not one solution, it's both and all of them simultaneously. So I'm not sure what it'll look like once we reach that, but I'm excited to see as we continue to grow in that direction.
Cierra and Coral, thank you so much for your conversation. I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate all the wisdom you shared with us and the time you've given us. Any final thoughts before we close?
I'll just say I really enjoyed seeing y'all again. And yeah, I really appreciate hearing, like, especially from Cierra. Thank you, Mia and Sharon, for having me. And yeah, I really appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that I have to add in closing besides extending gratitude and also acknowledging and appreciating this kind of different perspectives that we've kind of set up with having myself and Coral, you know, inside and outside of this academic setting, because we've been able to kind of speak through how some of these issues show up within academia and show up outside of academia within governmental work. So that's been really interesting. It's been really eye-opening for me, because those are things that I have yet to have experience with. So thank you so much for this.
Cierra, I hope even if you go into government work, you don't have to deal with the same things. I mean, I can't be too optimistic, but I really hope for your sake that the world changes a little bit as you enter the workforce. So thanks, Aya community. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks to Cierra and Coral, our guests, and many thanks to KBVR for producing our episodes for us. We'll see you all next week.